So the majority of Morbius has been printed in PLA on the Creality K1. I've had a few issues with this printer, but since I put right the build plate, and you can check that out in one of my other videos, this thing has been producing some fantastic models, from basic bases to this really intricate detailed section of the model, which has come out perfectly. I absolutely think the quality is amazing, and it's printed this whole bit here in just over 5 hours, which is incredible at 600mm a second. Again, this base a little bit longer than that, and I slowed down the printing process, but the quality is incredible. Now here you can see some resin and some PLA. Everything is in Jam J. It's either the Jam J Plus for the resin or the Jam J Super Speed PLA for the actual base itself. So the orange stuff is PLA, and look at the quality of that. Now I've always been an advocate of, since moving across to resin, that you can't get the quality you get in resin in PLA, but I did one leg in PLA using the Creality K1, and I did one in resin using my Uniformation GK2, and I have to say the quality difference is, you can't tell. It's amazing. I'm really amazed at the quality and the detail the K1 has produced. But of course, the Uniformation GK2 in this cold weather in the UK is a fantastic printer for your resin bits and pieces. Absolutely recommend you get both of these printers. Now there's all the bits of the base put together. The white is in resin, the orange is in PLA. Oh, what a fantastic base. Now before anyone points out I haven't done all the bits, there's a couple of bats missing, I decided I didn't want to do them. So if you want to do them, that's fine, but for me, I just wanted the base to be a little bit more basic, and I've primed everything in Chaos Black. So just who is Morbius? Well, in the Marvel universe, Michael Morbius is depicted as a famous biochemist who contracts a rare blood disease, which he then tries to cure by using a combination of experimental chemicals, electroshock therapy and genetic samples of vampire bats, and the experiment mutates him into a living vampire. So to give him that vampiric skin, I'm using bleached bone to just give his face and his arms that pallid skin colour. Now for that real rich red colour, I'm using in Carmine Red, and there's a couple of areas on his costume around the collar, the highly exaggerated collar, and the flippy flappy bits on the back of his arms that look like material hanging down, and also on his belt. These are all red, and this in Carmine Red is a wonderful colour to give that almost blood colour red that I'm after on his uniform. So the base is now all primed and ready for a little bit of graveyard greying action. So what I'm going to do is give it a bit of a dry brush, and the first step is going to be just some basic brush on primer. I think this grey looks fabulous for the first coat, and I'm going to use a smaller dry brush, and there'll be a link in the description where you can get these from. These are fantastic little dry brushes, and I'm going to go right the way across the whole model. I don't want to turn it grey, I want to leave plenty of black in the background, but I also want to give it that stone kind of effect. So dry brushing with this little brush with the primer gives us this effect, which has really come out well. Chuffed with that. Next step we want to do is just lighten it up a little bit, so I'm going to use some Stone Golem, quite a prompt, apt name there. Bigger dry brush this time, more of a makeup brush, and I'm just going to go over the highlighted areas really. I'm not going to go over the whole thing. I just want to add another layer of dry brushing to it, and again, I don't forget the floor, don't forget all the edges, and everything gets a coat of that, and that's what we look like now with a drier brush of that lighter colour, and I think you'd agree that's starting to look fantastic, isn't it? Right, plate mail metal is what I'm using to go over the metallic sections of the actual base. I want to just set these apart a little bit from the rest of it, and I'm going to do some aging and some rust effects on this, but give these a dry brush right the way across. I'm not taking too much off the brush this time. I'm going to make them more of a silver colour, and just to add one final layer across the stonework really, I'm using white just literally on the edges of the golem thing and across the stonework, just the very edges, not too much, and that's the last layer of the colour we're going to put on that. And then for the magic, some streaking grime here from AK. And I'm just popping this on a brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab this across for the first stage, and this grime effect just makes it look aged and tired and old, and that is exactly what we're after. This stuff is fantastic stuff. I'll put a link into the description where you can get it from. And I'm going to go over the whole model conservatively. I'm not going to change the colour of everything, but I'm going to give it a real good blast all the way across, strategically, if you will. And there we go. Now you can see that looks a bit aged and it looks like there's some moss gathering. And I'm going to take now a fine brush and go back to that streaky, grimy colour. And I'm just going to paint a few lines down. I've put a bit in the lid, so I don't need too much really. And I just want to make it look like it's run down in certain areas. Again, just adds another effect. Just makes it a little bit less boring, a little bit different. Make sure you go over a few areas of this and just use your artistic ab lib to give it a few streaks here and there. Now, if you like what you see today and you want to support the channel, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. You can subscribe to the channel, and it's always good to have a subscriber or two. Yeah, so hit that subscribe button, it will only take you a second. If you want to join the Greedy 3D Patreon, all the details will be in the description, or if you need to buy paints or printers or anything, there's a link in the description and a little bit will kick back to the channel. Now, to add that effect of rust, I'm using some dry rust here from the Army Painter on a dry brush again, and all I'm going to do is put a little bit on the brush and dab it on. I don't want to change it to an orange colour, I just want to give it a speckling effect. And the other thing I'm doing is taking a really thin brush and painting the run marks down, and then taking a thicker brush and just dabbing it in, and by doing that you'll get some rust effects. A quick thank you at this point also to the sponsor of this video, which is Jam J. They very kindly sent me some resin and some PLA, and I highly recommend their products, not because they've given them to me, not at all, but because their products are really good. Link in the description, of course. I'm just taking a little bit of brown on a dry brush, and I'm just going to paint the bats, or dry brush the bats really. I just want to make them stick out a little bit more to the rest of the model. And once the bats are all done, there we go, you can see there's some wonderful effects on there, and that just sets the base off really. I love the dry brush effect to give you that stone look, that aged stone look, also with the grime effects. I think you'll agree that does look like an old, ancient, decrepit old base churchyard, and that is exactly what we were after. I'm just taking some matte black, and I'm going to tidy up all the areas where the red has overspilled to neaten everything up. And I'm also going to use this black to give his hair a base layer of black and cover up all of that pallid bone colour which has leaked onto his face. Now, for his uniform, Griffin Blue on a dry brush is what I'm going to use, and I've put quite a bit of paint on this brush, but I do want the black to come through, and I'll put a higher coat as well on. But the colour of his uniform, or his costume, is blue, but I do want the shadow effect to come through. So a thick brush, quite a bit of paint, but using a dry brush technique to get that right the way across. Now, to bring that forward a little bit, I've taken the same Griffin Blue and I've mixed it with some white paint, and I'm just going to concentrate here on the highlighted areas of his uniform. That'll be like where his muscles are sticking out a little bit more, and I'm just going to merge that in and blend it in and give it lots and lots of brushes backwards and forwards, not loading my brush up too much at all, just to give that highlight effect, to make it look like there's some light bouncing off the areas where his muscles would be sticking out. Now, for his skin, I've took some flesh wash here, just an Army Painter wash, and I'm just going to go over his flesh to give it a little bit of a colour. Although I've given him that sort of real pale base colour, I do want to put a bit of a fleshy tone in certain areas. And you might think, well, that looks a bit of a mess, Greedy, but bear with me on this one. Now, I'm also doing exactly the same to his hands and his arms, and I'm going to take a bit of a kitchen roll also and get the excess of that wash off, just to leave it into the nooks and crannies. Now, some of this pink colour, this reddish pink for his lips, and you need to paint this just at the edge of his lip where his teeth begin. We're going to make this into a kind of a gum line, and again, I know it looks a bit strange at the moment, bear with it. Zealot Yellow, which is an Army Painter speed paint, is going to go around his eyes and under his eyes. Now, his eyes are going to be red, but I do want a background of that Zealot Yellow all around his eyes there. And I'm going to just take a really thin brush with some black paint on and just paint those really black eyebrows in next. before we move on to the blood red speed paint. And I'm going to do a couple of things with this. I'm going to do the whites of his eyes, which will now turn into the reds of his eyes, and I'm also going to paint his tongue. And I'm going to give his tongue a couple of layers of this because I want the inner part of his tongue to look real dark red. Drake's tooth is the colour that I'm using for the teeth, and I'm going to give these a base layer of this colour before I bring out some magic speed paint to give them that grotty look. Once that's on, there's the magic speed paint. I was on about pallid bone, and just get that on the teeth, and that will really dirty up the teeth and make them look really vampiric and nasty. And you can see me there painting it on, and you can see the colour difference that you get. Now the good thing with this speed paint on teeth is the dark will settle into the ridges between, and that now is the face pretty much done. You can see why I put the colours around the face, in his eyes, and also now I'm putting that pallid bone across his nails. That's all done and dusted. Let's have a look at the final result.